Hello Resi Drivers, welcome back to the channel. So I've been reflecting on how I got my mortgage 15 years ago, and I've realized that there was a lot I didn't fully understand at the time, and I've since learned that it is possible to convince yourself that you can afford that mortgage when in actual fact you can't. So in this video I want to share with you 4 things that you should consider if you're planning to get on the property ladder here in the UK, especially as a first-time buyer. These are things that will ensure that you avoid those unexpected challenges further down the line. The first thing I want to talk about is documentation. Now, I've already covered this in some of my videos that if you're planning to get a mortgage in the UK, you need to meet the eligibility criteria. Especially if you're an immigrant, you need to have the right type of documentation. First of all, you need to have a visa, the right type of visa, because a mortgage is a long-term commitment. So I would advise you to watch that video. But what I want to talk about is documentation. What I underestimated when it came to submitting my documentation. I thought I had everything figured out, but the amount of scrutiny that I faced at the time, every document had to be scrutinized. I had to make photocopies. Some documents, I had to certify them. So yeah, there was a lot that was needed at the time. And what I'll say on this point is it helps if you're organized. Trust me, that process can be a bit stressful. When you can't find a bill or a pay slip that is needed, it always helps to have everything in one place where you can easily access them. So have your passport ready, utility bills, pay slips, and so on. And don't forget your credit history. I've already covered this in some of my videos. I'll also link those videos in the description. Make sure that you have a good credit history. If you're an immigrant who's just relocated, it is going to take a little while to build that credit history. So don't even think about getting a mortgage if your credit score is not up to scratch, because the mortgage lenders are going to do a credit search on you to ensure that you're somebody who can be trusted, you pay your bills on time, that you're actually able to repay the mortgage every month. So yeah, this is the first thing I wanted to mention. One of the things that I underestimated when it came to getting my mortgage. The second thing I want to cover is regarding the down payment. Now, this one is a no-brainer. You need a deposit if you're going to take out a mortgage. Now, when I got my mortgage, I paid around £15,000. It was a lot of money to put together, and it wasn't easy. And to be able to manage to save that money, I had to sacrifice a lot of things. I had to put holidays on hold. Even when it came to my groceries, I had to scrutinize everything that I was buying. At one point, I embraced beans on toast. I never used to eat beans on toast, but at that time, I embraced it. And I also worked around the clock, connecting shifts, just to save that money. And when it comes to going out, I completely tossed that out of the window. It was a no-go because I had to focus on saving that money. But one thing I didn't factor in as I was gathering that money, I didn't think about unexpected emergencies. And unfortunately, right before I paid that deposit, I found myself dealing with one such an emergency in the form of a bereavement. So yeah, because I had not saved towards those unexpected emergencies, I didn't have extra money. I had to dip into my savings to deal with that emergency. And unfortunately, I had to borrow some money to replace the money that I had used towards that funeral. Looking back, I realized that at the time, I was only focusing on saving towards the deposit and not thinking about those unexpected emergencies that can pop up at any time. Which reminds me of a podcast that I watched recently, Diary of a CEO. In that podcast, Steve was interviewing a financial expert, and that expert said something that really stuck with me. I want you to take a listen to this.
Is because your house is actually a money pit. And that's why I want you to think of your house as a liability. But I want you to hear me clearly. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy a house. I'm not saying it's bad to buy a house. You have to treat your house like a liability. With the best case scenario, you buy a home for, let's call it $300,000. You pay it off. And throughout your lifetime, this $300,000 home grows in value to $1 million. And now you're going to say, Jaspreet, I've showed you this is an asset. My house tripled in value, more than tripled in value, and now I'm going to pass it down to my kids. So now, yeah, your kid's got $1 million house, but unless they have the income to support paying for $1 million house, they might have to find some more cash. Now what do they do? Because you can't just pull cash out of this house, right? I mean, it's not an ATM unless you go to the bank. The bank will give you the cash because the bank says, oh, you have $1 million house. How about we loan you $800,000? But that's not an ATM because you have to pay that money back plus interest. And again, I'm not saying it's bad to own a house, but it's bad to own a house you can't afford.
So when I heard that financial expert say those words, I chuckled. I thought, wow, that was so me when I got my mortgage. Because at the time, because I was only focusing on getting the mortgage, on saving towards my deposit, on ticking that box, I wasn't thinking about what happens after, which will be my next point. Consider moving in cost, because when you get your mortgage, you need to consider things like stamp duty. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about stamp duty. A lot is happening when it comes to that. I was just reading the news a few days ago, some changes happening. And also you need to consider the legal fees as well. You need to pay towards those. And also you need to consider surveys as well. And also you might need to buy new furniture, unless you're buying a home that is already fully furnished with furniture that you really like. You may need to replace that furniture. You may need to replace, for example, the bed, which I had to do at the time. The sofas that were there, I didn't like them. I had to replace that as well. And the fridge, everything. I mean, the appliances that were in that house, I had to replace, but I had to wait a little while because I had not saved towards that furniture. And also the cost of physically moving from one home to that new home. If you need to take your old furniture to your new home, then the cost of delivering that furniture to your new home is something that you need to consider as well. You need to save towards. And also when you get your new home, you're going to need home insurance, and you're going to have to save towards unexpected emergencies. It is not a question of if, but it is a question of when. Since I got my home, I don't know how many times I've had to call the plumber. Your boiler will break, you will need to call the engineer, and you may be told that you need to replace your boiler. And I've had one horrible emergency that actually left me a little bit traumatized. It was involving my garage and my neighbor. Now my garage started leaking, and it leaked into my neighbor's garage, and my neighbor had parked his car, his brand new Porsche, in there. And because my garage was leaking into his garage, it was messing things up big time. So yeah, that was stressful, because one day I got a knock on my door, and you can imagine the conversation that we had. So I had to fork out some money to fix my garage. The roof was leaking, but for me it was not so much the amount of money that I had to fork out towards fixing the garage. It was the stress of having to deal with a neighbor who was annoyed with me. So these are things that you need to take into account when you get a mortgage, because getting a mortgage is a huge responsibility. The last thing I want to mention, if you're considering buying your first home in the UK, is maintenance. The real cost of owning that home. You are responsible for maintaining your home, and maintaining your home means extra cost. You need to maintain your home in terms of repairs and upgrades. You can't just buy a home and leave it at that. You will need to do some repair work, because over time things deteriorate. You will need to replace some appliances. You may need to do up your kitchen, your garden. When you buy a home, it is your responsibility to make sure that it is maintained in a state that doesn't infringe on other people's properties. And also there are certain standards that have to be maintained. I mean, if you've got a garden, for example, if your neighbors, everyone is doing up their gardens and yours is the only one that is neglected, I mean, it ruins the image of the whole street, doesn't it? I mean, no one is going to come and knock on your door and say, go and fix your garden, because, I mean, you know, you're an adult, it is your garden. But guess what? No one has to do that. You yourself, you just feel bad just seeing everyone maintaining their gardens, and you're the only one who is neglecting your garden. So it comes with a lot of responsibility. And also a part of that maintenance is you paying your bills, council tax, utility bills, and those monthly mortgage payments. Now, when it comes to council tax, you are charged depending on where your property, I mean the location of your property and what banding it comes under. So as a homeowner, you need to be aware of these things. Now, in my situation, there's a charge that surprised me. I didn't know about it when I bought my home, but I soon realized that actually I need to pay it, and that is ground rent, because apparently if you're buying a leasehold property, you need to pay that rent. I didn't know about it at the time, but like I said, I soon realized that it is something that I need to fork out regularly. So this is something that you need to be aware of. There are certain charges that may not be apparent when you buy your home. So if you're considering getting on the property ladder in the UK, do a bit of digging, find out exactly what you'll be paying and save towards those additional costs every month. Just set that money aside, because trust me, getting that mortgage, paying that deposit is not the end of it. There will be all these other things that I've mentioned in this video. So yeah, this is what I had for you in this video. As always, if you've got something to add, then by all means feel free to do so. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.